Our next stop is Disneyland, USA, where we see a contrast in transportation. Vintage steam locomotives and a monorail system that can be used today in cities with congested traffic problems. In 1985, Disneyland celebrated its 30th year of truly being Walt Disney's dream come true, the happiest place on earth. Throughout his life, Walt Disney loved trains. He was fascinated by the great iron locomotives that sped across the Missouri prairies of his boyhood. It came as no surprise then that Walt's lifelong fascination for riding the rails would be an integral part of Disneyland. There are some who suspect Walt built his famed Magic Kingdom as an excuse for expanding his train hobby. Boarding one of the 4 colorful trains in Disneyland is not just hopping aboard a train. It's actually stepping into a pioneer of early railroad history. It's experiencing a steam train ride of the past at a time when the West was just really beginning to grow. After more than 3 decades of service, the trains still have a brand new look. Daily maintenance includes washing, paint touch-up, lubrication, and hand polishing of all fittings. Once a year, each engine is dismantled for a thorough overhaul. Both locomotives and rolling stock are completely repainted annually.
Report.
The Disneyland Railroad is a complete line with automatic block signals all along the route, crossing gates, warning lights and bells, and a rectangular roundhouse where each train is carefully washed and polished every night. With so much use, the trains must be kept always in top condition. The maintenance team, headed since 1961 by Ken Kohler, does just that, servicing each train thoroughly on a rotating basis. The train's gleaming appearances and smooth performances are quite a matter of pride. The whistle-stop crew got to the park early one morning to meet with Ken Kohler, who not only is in charge of the locomotives, but also the monorail maintenance shop located above the roundhouse. The facility northeast of It's a Small World was constructed in 1966. Ken gave us a brief history of their stable of locomotives.
The Fred Gurley that you're looking at right now is actually an 1894 Baldwin locomotive. We bought her, brought her in here and refurbished her and put her in service in 1958 along with the opening of the Grand Canyon diorama. She came to us actually off from a plantation. We're used to haul sugarcane in the south. Great little locomotive. It's a solid frame. The tender's on board for the fuel and the water. It's a number 2 diesel oil, and it'll run a good 8-hour shift, 10-hour shift without refueling. This locomotive, the EP Ripley, is locomotive number 2. This is one of the 2 locomotives that were built at Walt Disney Studio prior to park opening in 1955. It was a situation where Walt had asked if locomotives could be built at the studio, and the man in charge of the machine shop was a man by the name of Roger Brogy. He said definitely. So they made their own castings, did their own machine work, and that's where number 1 and number 2 locomotives came from. They are a replica of the locomotives around the turn of the century, what they were designed after. It also is a diesel burning locomotive. Difference being it has a tender that it tows along instead of being on the same frame. The difference between number 1 and number 2 locomotive is basically in the stack. The number 1 locomotive is what you call a diamond stack. And of course the color being different. The number 4 locomotive here is the Ernest S. Marsh. is a 1925 Baldwin locomotive that we bought out of a quarry. That time she came to us with saddleback over the boiler that carried its water and fuel. We took it to the studio and refurbished it, took the saddle off, new boiler on, threw the running gears, built a tender for her, and put her in service in 1961. She also carries a diamond stack, much smaller than the one on number 1. Yes, there's 4 engines and 4 different coach setups. We have what we call the Holiday Green, Holiday Blue, Holiday Red. All of those are identified by the striped canvas tops that they have on. And then we have the excursion train, which actually represents an old excursion type train used in the South many years ago.
Walt felt that the enclosed cars with their framed windows offered too limited a view of his Grand Canyon diorama and primeval world attraction. So they were thereafter used only occasionally in inclement weather. Originally named the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad, the line's first 2 locomotives were named for 2 important figures in the railway's history, C.K. Holliday and E.P. Ripley, respectively, the founder and early president of the Santa Fe Railroad. Even though the physical fabrication of the wheels, frames, boilers, and other fixtures was done by outside contractors, every detail was meticulously designed and rendered at the Disney studio. Final assembly of all components was done at Disneyland. Authentic in every detail, from a brass guide on the cowcatcher to a shiny brass whistle atop the steam domes, the 15-ton engines are among the most colorful ever run on a regular schedule. In their only bow to modern railroading, the engines gave up wood-burning fireboxes in favor of oil flames, but the plumes of white vapor still provide an explosive thrill as firemen perform the ancient ritual of blowing down to clear the boiler. Old-timers and children alike watch in awe as the lustrous engines with flashing red wheels come rolling into the old-fashioned brick station on Main Street. On the spur track adjacent to the station is an authentic handcar that was a gift to Walt from the Kalamazoo Manufacturing Company of Kalamazoo, Michigan. The benches located throughout the lobby and the waiting area are reminiscent of a bygone era. On Disneyland steam trains, adults relive memories of train rides of the past, while freeway-oriented youngsters experience travel as it was in a bygone era. Frontierland Station reveals a composite of many early frontier train stations. The sound of an old telegraph key clicking out messages can be heard through the open window of the station. To the left of the passenger depot is a train order signal. This type of signal is used to tell the engineer if there is a change in the train's orders or if there are any passengers or mail to be picked up at the station. This signal was given to the park in 1962 by William White, board chairman of the Delaware and Hudson Railroad Corporation. To the right of the freight station is the water tower, where the steam trains stop every few hours to take on water. One car from the old train returned to the rails in 1976, but in a much grander style than before. Under the direction of Bill Cottrell, the outmoded observation car became the sumptuous Lilly Belle, bicentennial special and presidential car of the Disneyland Railroad. Often seen but rarely experienced, the Lilly Belle seats some 16 guests comfortably on chairs and settee upholstered in burgundy crushed velvet. Live palms, silk roses, brass fixtures, stained glass skylights, and ornate parquet woodwork ornament the car, which, though in service daily, is reserved for prearranged VIPs. On Disneyland's opening day, Walt Disney himself was at the throttle, along with California Governor Goodwin Knight and Fred Gurley, president of the Santa Fe Railroad. The Disneyland trains are the dreams and reflections of Walt Disney's love for trains, an interest that dates from his days as a news butcher on the Santa Fe between Kansas City and Jefferson City, Missouri. When Disneyland opened in July 1955, it featured an exposition of transportation systems, from horses to riverboats to locomotives. But the Magic Kingdom moved to the technological forefront with the introduction of the Mark I monorail system in 1959. This was the first passenger-carrying monorail of its kind in the Western Hemisphere to operate on a daily basis. And it was the direct result of one of Walt Disney's commitments to develop an entertaining attraction that also provided a practical, futuristic mode of transportation. In 1958, Disney Imagineers traveled to Europe to examine an experimental monorail developed by the Allweg Corporation near Cologne, Germany. After considerable study, they recommended to Walt Disney that he introduce a similar model at Disneyland. Disney designers, assisted by Allweg engineers, developed what became known as the Mark I, a monorail system built at the Burbank Disney Studios by WED. WED stands for Walter Elias Disney Enterprises, the design and Imagineering arm of Walt Disney Productions. The Mark I was purposely designed to demonstrate operability under different topographic conditions. The Disneyland Allweg monorail system was unveiled at Disneyland on June 14, 1959 by Walt Disney and Vice President Richard M. Nixon. Mrs. Nixon and their daughters Tricia and Julie also participated in the ribbon-cutting ceremonies, which were viewed by a national television audience watching a special Disneyland 59 TV show. The monorail beamway was extended to the nearby Disneyland Hotel in 1961. Making the system the first in America to run adjacent to a major highway and cross a city street, a total length of nearly 2.5 miles. The present monorail system at Disneyland, the Mark III, was designed by WED to accommodate a growing Disneyland audience. In 1969, after almost 5 years of research and development, 4 new streamlined 5-car trains were built to replace the earlier models that had carried over 30 million passengers more than 850,000 miles in 10 years. The Mark III trains contain 127 passengers and are 137 feet long. A new frame and body for the trains was designed to be driven by an advanced engineered electrical power unit, and a new suspension system created a smoother ride. The Mark III has a top running speed of approximately 35 miles per hour, although it seems to be going a lot faster. But this speed is used only for crossing the Disneyland parking lot. Within the park, the trains run between 15 and 18 miles per hour. Utilizing an air and dynamic braking system, the Mark III drive and braking pneumatic tires run on the top surface of the monorail beamway, and the guiding and stabilizing wheels contact both lateral surfaces of the beam. The Disneyland monorail system has changed greatly over the years, but many of the same technological principles have been maintained throughout the development of the system. The trains have always been electrically powered, operating on 600 volts of direct current, transmitted along a pair of copper and steel bus bars mounted on the right side of the beam. The monorail is powered by 4 100-horsepower traction motors, in contrast to the 4 55-horsepower motors of the Mark I and II. The undercarriage of the trains straddles the beam in such a way that the drive and braking wheels run along the top surface of the beamway, and the guiding and stabilizing wheels contact both lateral surfaces of the beam. These wheels, 8 rolling in a horizontal plane and 4 rolling in a vertical plane, are connected together by means of a welded steel frame. The forms from which the individual beams were cast are steel shells that can be adjusted to produce curving, twisting concrete girders. Most of the beams on the Disneyland monorail range in length from 32 to 42 feet. Beams of this length measure 20 inches wide by 34 inches deep and have a design strength of 5,000 pounds per square inch. However, 50 beams, each 60 feet long, were used on the straightaway across Harbor Boulevard and across the parking lot. Each of these 50 beams weighs 46,000 pounds. To maintain the design strength of these beams, it was necessary to increase their depth to 40 inches. The beamways and pylons, as constructed for the Disneyland all-wag monorail system, are substantially the same size and scale that would be used for any metropolitan single-track system. The basic design of the cars, including their motive power, braking, and safety systems, could be utilized for any metropolitan transit system. For a city transit monorail, the cars, however, would possibly be larger to provide for baggage, mail, and standing room. The Disneyland trains have carried most of the heads of state, movie queens, presidents, and stars who have visited Disneyland, as well as millions of other Disneyland visitors from every state and nearly every nation.